Hey, how's it going, eh? So, like, July 1st is Canada Day, eh? So, because it's the year of the plague, we can't get out and about, right? So, I thought I'd do like a virtual armchair tour of Canada for my pronunciation tip, eh? All right. So, that's a classic stereotypical Canadian accent, and every Canadian knows that's a Canadian accent. And most Canadians don't actually talk like that. Some do. Most Canadians sound pretty much like me right here, right now, with, regional variations. And likewise, it's stereotypical that Canadians love hockey, and, well, okay, most Canadians do love hockey, but not all of us. And it's stereotypical that Canadians drink Molson Canadian or Labatt's Blue. And frankly, I prefer a nice local microbrew myself. So, let's have a nice local Canadian microbrew from Toronto, where I live now. And we'll go through the provinces and territories of Canada with the capitals of each and the largest cities. And I'm going to start on the west and go east and then do the north because that's the way I think of it. On the west coast of Canada is British Columbia. British Columbia, or as most Canadians say it, BC. It was given its name by Queen Victoria, who gave it that name because it's the British portion of the basin of the Columbia River. The Columbia River was named after Christopher Columbus, about whom the less is said, the better. The capital of British Columbia is Victoria, which was named after Queen Victoria. Victoria is on Vancouver Island. The biggest city in British Columbia is Vancouver, or as some people say it, Vancouver. It is not on Vancouver Island. Vancouver was named after George Vancouver, an exploring sea captain who died in England at age 40. Yikes. Next, east from BC and across the Rockies, is one of 3 Canadian provinces named after royalty. It's Alberta, named after Princess Louise Caroline Alberta, one of the daughters of Queen Victoria. She's also the namesake for Lake Louise in Banff National Park. Alberta's biggest city is Calgary. You can say Calgary if you want, but don't say Calgary. It's Calgary. And Calgary was named after a little place on the Mull of Kintyre in Scotland. The capital of Alberta is Edmonton. Edmonton. And Edmonton has the biggest shopping mall in North America, West Edmonton Mall. That's West Edmonton Mall. I worked there for a while, 30 years ago. Edmonton is named after a suburb of London, England. Next, east from Alberta, the middle province of the 3 prairie provinces, is Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan. It's named after the Saskatchewan River, and the Saskatchewan River is named from Cree for swift-flowing river. There's a city in Saskatchewan named after a swift-flowing river. It's called Swift Current. The biggest city in Saskatchewan is Saskatoon. Saskatoon is named after berries. Yes, that's right. Saskatoon berries are berries that everybody in Western Canada knows about, and nobody else seems to know about. They're very nice, though. So yes, Saskatoon berries, from a word for them in Cree, Saskatoon, and then the city called Saskatoon, after the berries. The capital of Saskatchewan used to be named Pile of Bones, but before it became the capital, it was renamed by Princess Louise Caroline Alberta, who was the wife of the Governor-General of Canada, the Marquess of Lorne, daughter of Queen Victoria. It was renamed Regina in honor of Queen Victoria. The easternmost of the prairie provinces is Manitoba. Manitoba. Manitoba is named after Lake Manitoba, which is named for a Cree or Ojibwe or Assiniboine word for the narrows in the middle of Lake Manitoba. The capital and largest city of Manitoba is Winnipeg, and Winnipeg is named after Lake Winnipeg. Winnipeg is Cree for muddy water. The city, Winnipeg, is not on Lake Winnipeg. You have to drive from Winnipeg, the city, to get to Lake Winnipeg. Next east is the most populous, though not the most popular, province in Canada, Ontario. Ontario. Ontario is named after Lake Ontario. Lake Ontario, which was originally just Ontario, from here on for Great Lake, which is slightly ironic because although it is a Great Lake, it's actually the smallest of the 5 Great Lakes. The capital and largest city of Ontario is Toronto. And if you say Toronto, then people will know you're not from Toronto. Around here, people mostly say Toronto. Toronto. There are some people who will insist that you cannot say Toronto. They say, if you say the second T, that's wrong. You're wrong. You're not from here. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. Well, guess what? They're wrong. My wife was born and raised in Toronto, and I asked her just today, this very day, hey, what's the name of the city you were born and raised in? And she said, Toronto. Why? True fact, even the newscasters say Toronto. A lot of people in Toronto say Toronto sometimes if they want to be clear. So, if you say Toronto, you're not wrong. But if you say Toronto, you won't have people getting all up in your face about it. The word Toronto is from the Mohawk Tkaronto, which means where there are trees standing in the water. Most cities in Ontario have very easy to pronounce names. Windsor, London, Waterloo, Kitchener, Hamilton, St. Catharines, Peterborough. I do want to make a point of telling you how to pronounce Ottawa. Ottawa is the capital of Canada, and it's in the province Ontario. It doesn't have its own separate province or anything. Ottawa is named after the Ottawa River, which is from Algonquian adawe, meaning trade, as in to trade, the verb, trade. Next, east from Ontario, is Quebec. Quebec is Canada's largest province, although most people stay in the south part of it near the St. Lawrence River. Quebec is also Canada's francophone province, La Belle Province. You can tell something about a person from how they say the name of the province. If they say Quebec, they're Anglophone. If they say Quebec, they're Francophone. And if they say Quebec, then you know that you don't have to pay attention to another word they say. You can ignore all their opinions on everything. People from Quebec are called, in English, often Quebecers, but in French, Québécois. The biggest city in Quebec is Montreal, or in French, Montréal. Montreal, Montréal. That's from French for Mount Royal, Royal Mountain. The capital of Quebec is Quebec, or Quebec City, or La Ville de Québec. And that's where the province gets its name. Specifically, the city gets its name from Ojibwe, Quebec, where the river narrows. Where does the river narrow? At Quebec City, of course. Next after Quebec is New Brunswick, or in French, Nouveau-Brunswick. New Brunswick is Canada's only officially bilingual province, English and French. New Brunswick was originally part of Acadia, and it got renamed after Queen Victoria's grandfather, George III, King of Great Britain, King of Ireland, and Prince-Elector of Brunswick-Lüneburg, which is actually in Germany. So yes, it was named after royalty too. Its capital is Fredericton, not Fredericton, Fredericton. That was named in honor of the second son of King George III, Prince Frederick Augustus, Duke of York. The biggest city in New Brunswick is Moncton, named after Lieutenant Colonel Robert Moncton, about whom hoop-de-doo, I don't know. Next is Canada's smallest province, which used to have its longest name, Prince Edward Island, or as most Canadians say it, PEI. Prince Edward Island is named for Prince Edward. Duh. Who was he? He was the son of King George III and the father of Queen Victoria. So you got that? New Brunswick was named after George III. Prince Edward Island was named after his son, Prince Edward. And Alberta was named after his granddaughter, Princess Louise Caroline Alberta. Very cozy, isn't it? And the capital and largest city of Prince Edward Island is Charlottetown. Charlottetown. It was named in honor of Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, the wife of King George III. Yeah. Next is Nova Scotia, which is Latin for New Scotland. In French, they call it Nouvelle-Écosse, New Scotland. But it's not a bilingual province. So you can just call it Nova Scotia, which isn't English either. It's Latin, like I just told you. Duh. Its capital and largest city is Halifax. Now, there's a city in England called Halifax, but Halifax technically was named after George Montague Dunk, the second Earl of Halifax, that place in England. Across the harbor from Halifax is Dartmouth. Got that? Dartmouth. Not Dartmouth, Dartmouth, which was named in honor of William Legge, first Earl of Dartmouth, and I don't know anything else about him. And then there's Newfoundland. Well, Newfoundland and Labrador. It used to be just called Newfoundland, but at a certain point they decided to officially recognize their mainland holding, Labrador, as part of the province name because there's a lot of oil there and they didn't want Quebec to look too hungrily at it. So, Newfoundland and Labrador is now the province with the longest name, but everybody still just calls it Newfoundland. It's not Newfoundland. It's not even Newfoundland, as King Henry VII apparently called it after the Cabots found it. It's Newfoundland. And people from Newfoundland are Newfoundlanders. They are not Newfies. Don't call them Newfies. That's rude. They're Newfoundlanders. The capital and largest city of Newfoundland is St. John's, or, as they say in Newfoundland, St. John's. The name of St. John's has been attributed to the celebration day of the Nativity of St. John the Baptist, which is apparently when John Cabot was believed to have sailed into St. John's Harbor in 1497. Now let's go up north to the territories. The westernmost territory is Yukon. We used to call it the Yukon, but it's been rebranded. Now it's Yukon. Yukon, write that down. Yukon is named after the Yukon River, which was named from Gwich'in, meaning white water river. And its capital and largest city is Whitehorse, that's one word, Whitehorse, which was named after the Whitehorse Rapids, that's Whitehorse, two words, Rapids. Remember Whitewater River, on the Yukon River, for the resemblance to the mane of a white horse. If you want to ride, you ride the white horse. Next, the Northwest Territories. I think you know how to say Northwest Territories, but do you know how to write it? It's two words, not three. Northwest Territories. Its capital and largest city is Yellowknife, which is named after a local Dene tribe who traded tools made from copper deposits near the Arctic coast. Yellowknife, the Yellowknife Dene. Here's a bonus city in the Northwest Territories, Inuvik, which means place of man in Inuvialuktun. Inuvik, not Inuvik, Inuvik. The newest territory in Canada is Nunavut. Nunavut, which is pronounced Nunavut, you could say Nunavut, you could say none of it, but why would you when you can say Nunavut? Nunavut means our land in Inuktitut, and it is in fact more than 80% Inuit. Inuit, by the way, is pronounced Inuit, Inuit or Inuit, not Inuit. I saw a book a while ago that said you pronounce it Inuit. This is wrong. And it's definitely not pronounced Eskimo. The capital and largest city of Nunavut is Iqaluit. Okay, it's Iqaluit, which means place of many fish in Inuktitut, but you can say Iqaluit, Iqaluit. If you say I quail you it, I'm going to find you and I'm going to smite you. Also, don't call it Frobisher Bay. For a time, it was called Frobisher Bay after the bay it's on, which in turn was named after Martin Frobisher, an English privateer, from the time when guys wore codpieces. But he was a schmuck. He brought boatloads of fool's gold back to England. The less is said about him, the better. So, in total then, Canada has 10 provinces, 3 territories. Of those, 3 are named after royals: Alberta, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island. 5 are named after rivers, lakes, or associated water features: Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, and Yukon. Of the capitals of the provinces and territories, and the country, by the way, 4 are named after royals. 2 after the same one, Victoria and Regina. And then there's Fredericton and Charlottetown. 5 are named after rivers, lakes, or associated water features. That would be Winnipeg, Toronto, Ottawa, Quebec, and Iqaluit. So there you go. Happy Canada Day. Oh, Canada, our home's on native land. And don't you forget it.